Everybody listen to We're Not Wizards, because we are the best, and we're not wizards, no matter what anybody says. Goodbye.
Are you suffering under the heat at the moment?
I really am. I'm not built for the heat. I think this is a Scottish thing, isn't it?
I'm just kind of.
I think this is like. We're going to be the first to die in the climate change apocalypse, aren't we?
Just Scottish people are not built for anything probably above about 25 degrees, and we're all going to go from everybody's going to go bright red. Just regardless of, I think, race, religion, creed, or whatever. I think as soon as you become Scottish, you just automatically you burn, regardless.
Yeah, I mean, if the weather doesn't make you turn bright red, then there's always the political climate. It's interesting times, isn't it?
It's like 2 minutes in, you're dropping kind of politics in. So this independence cup incoming independence vote's going to be interesting now that we've got. It's not very good. We spoke a while ago, not a long time ago, but a longish time ago. And at the time we were speaking, it was over a year ago actually. It's been 13 months, can you believe that? It's almost been 13 months to the day. And at that time, I think you were in the process of, I don't know if the Kickstarter was actually running at the time for the board game book.
I think it would have been finished at that point, and we might have been on to pre-orders, but don't take my word for that, because everything from the past year has just kind of become a confusing blur in my mind. But yeah, no, obviously a lot's happened since then. We got the book out, yes, and people have been largely very complimentary about it, which is great. We got a really nice review from Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower, which turns out to be a thing that really helps you sell books. So yes, yeah. I mean, is it different in your experience? Was it different kind of putting the book together than it was kind of seeing from the Kickstarter games together? Was that kind of like a different process? Were you able to kind of keep tweaking it for longer before you sent it to the printers? Was the print turnaround quite a quick thing? Yeah, well, so there were a couple of hold-ups on the production side. One of those was caused by me losing a couple of weeks at a kind of critical stage when we had a kind of family illness that we needed to deal with, and thankfully that was all resolved. But it did, it basically meant that I lost the couple of weeks I'd intended to take off from the day job to work on the book. So that set us back, but I mean, we kind of extended the window of inclusion for games, so we got some more recent stuff because we knew it was going to come out a bit later than we'd intended. We got it out in time for the UK Games Expo, and we had a fantastic time there. We were quite conservative, it turns out, with the number of books we took down. We took one pallet down with us, and we thought, like, how many of these are we going to have to cart back, on the train from Birmingham to Glasgow, and we sold the lot in a day and a half. So yeah, I was really pleased with that, obviously, because if nothing else, it meant I could wander around on the Sunday and just play loads of games and just be a punter.
Did you have a stand then? Did you have an actual stand set up?
Yeah. We had a small stand. It was tucked away right at the back of Hall 2, next to the kind of jewellery merchants and the dingier of the hot dog stalls and things like that. So I was quite pleased that we did as well as we did, because we weren't right next to Fantasy Flight or Portal Games. Well, we're quite close to Portal Games actually, but people were really interested when they saw it and when they got their hands on it. Particularly, that was great. I think people really appreciate having this kind of physical
product, something that they can kind of leaf through and look at. And I'd say at least 20% of people who stopped at the stand smelled the book, which was not something I'd anticipated.
You've got to smell.
And I'm wondering whether we can. Yeah, well, I'm wondering whether we can put like some sort of like scented kind of, I don't know, essential oils or something in the ink for the next one. Maybe that'd help us shift a few more copies.
I don't know if it's just like a rule book thing. Maybe it's like a good luck thing. I don't know. What's it like? It's like the whole coffee thing, isn't it? You do get people that I know that they'll get. There's a couple of folk. I remember you used to work with folk who used to get really, really brassed off if you were in and kind of opened up the Nescafe Gold Blend before they did, because they wanted to be in with a spoon and breaking the surface and then sniffing it in like somebody in some kind of chemical buzz or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's do you know what it is? It's the freshness of components and stuff like that. I had that. I had it quite recently with. I got sent a copy of Parks, and I don't know if you're aware of that. It was.
That's the US National Parks.
Yes.
With the really nice kind of retro poster artwork.
Yes, it's absolutely beautiful. But one thing that is stunning in it is that it's got painted kind of wooden tokens in it, and they're in game trays. So when you open up the top of the game trays, you get this smell of kind of wood and almost like paint varnish kind of hitting your nostrils at the same time. So it's quite it's kind of strange because it kind of adds a little bit to the kind of experience. I can completely understand that. Did you have kind of people coming up who'd backed the book as well and were just kind of coming up to kind of say hello?
That was great.
And
that was fantastic. And we did manage to post them all before Expo, because one of the things I really wanted to make sure was that the books were on their way to backers before they were kind of available to buy for the general public.
Yeah.
So we just kind of squeaked that out, so I was pleased with that. But we got some great feedback. It was really nice to meet people who'd given us their support. It's that's the thing about Expo, really. It's it's such a for all that it's getting bigger, it's still quite a sociable gathering where you can meet people and you can have conversations and things like that. It was a great experience. Obviously, in terms of kind of selling all the books that we took to it, but also in kind of meeting people, having chats with them, finding out what kind of stuff they're interested in, because that that kind of informs what we're going to do for future editions. Yeah,
did you based on because I guess you can't really get the actual proper feedback until people have it kind of in their hands. And one of the things I love myself is the fact that the page where you've put the page numbers, that you've not just put the page numbers at the bottom of the pages. The sections themselves, you've sectioned them off so that you can actually easily find the sections based on the colours that you're kind of looking for, which is kind of quite cool. So all the complex strategy games are under kind of some kind of lovely chocolate brown, whereas if you're if you're kind of in your gold kind of colour and your medium kind of games, you're kind of like that's where you can kind of find that. Was there feedback that's you've kind of seriously kind of taken on board and said, well, actually, we've had a few people say it'd be great if you could have X, Y, Z in the next volume?
Yeah, the one thing we've heard from a couple of people is that they would like the spine to be a little bit different so they can lay it flat. And I think that's maybe so they can leave it on their coffee table, with a certain game open. I don't know, maybe that's to drop hints for Christmases and anniversaries and things like that. But yeah, that's one thing we've heard from a few folks. I'm trying to think if there was anything else that came up as a suggestion. Not really. For the most part, people have been just really complimentary about it, have really kind of got what we're trying to do. Just very, very pleased with how people have responded to it and that people have been enjoying it. And every time I see a kind of 5-star review on Amazon or someone saying something nice about the book on Twitter, or even, people taking pictures when they see it in a shop, that's, it's fantastic. It gets me quite excited.
What's it been like with the distribution? Because I'm guessing that the distribution for, obviously the distribution for the book's going to be
is it going to be different to the distribution for kind of like board games?
Well, in the UK it isn't, because it's actually distributed through Asmodee.
Oh, okay, well, that's fine then.
So, yeah, just because they have, they've got the best kind of connections with retailers in the industry, and then for the book trade, we're distributed through Gardeners, which is the kind of biggest.
Oh yeah,
the biggest book distributor in the UK. So. It's kind of interesting because obviously Asmodee are a games company, so they really get kind of what we're trying to do. They're quite enthusiastic and geeky about it themselves, because everyone who works there is you couldn't really work there without being interested in games.
Yeah.
With the book trade side of things, it's a little. It takes a little bit more explaining. Some bookstores are great, like kind of Heifers in Cambridge, which is part of the Blackwell's chain.
Yeah.
Really loved it, and they kind of got an order in straight away. And they are actually pretty big, games retailers in their own right. I know the Edinburgh one is like the hub of Scottish X-Wing. And the Cambridge store has a games area that's bigger than most game stores. So they were kind of really into it. Other places like Waterstones, they've got it on special order, so someone has to actually come in and ask for it before they'll sell it to them, which is a bit of a bummer. But we've still sold quite a few through them. So hopefully, with the next edition, we can say, hey, look how well this did for us last year. Mm-hmm. Are you sure you don't want to make some money from gamers who, believe it or not, like to spend money on gaming things? It's this weird thing that we have.
Has it given you kind of confidence yourself a bit more as well? Because I guess one of the foundations of a writer is you have to have a level of kind of almost a little bit of arrogance and confidence in your work, because otherwise, why the hell would you put it out there for kind of people to read? Oh God, I'm
screwed then.
But in terms of you've got this, you've got this fabulous tome. People are reading it. People are saying some positive things about it. Has that kind of helped boost your confidence to say, right, okay, well, what else can I do? Is there a market here to crack into? Genres of games. Produce different kind of volumes, kind of thing.
Yeah, we're definitely looking at, we're already working on Volume 2, and we're looking to take that to Kickstarter at the start of September.
Oh, right, okay.
And yeah, there's some stuff that I haven't announced yet, but I suppose it probably, here seems like as good a place to announce it as any. We're going to have some new folks joining the team. So Matt Thrower is going to be joining us again. He did a great job for us on the last edition, and so is Richard Jansen-Parks, who is our RPG specialist. This time around, we've got Dan Jolin, who's going to be writing for us as well, who is fantastic game and movie critic. He's a kind of regular contributor to Empire, the big film magazine. Just a great writer. And we also have Anna Blackwell coming onto the team. And she is, she plays a heck of a lot of stuff across a wide spectrum of games, everything from kind of indie RPGs through to party games, through to more kind of complex and involved stuff. But again, just a really accomplished writer, and so that's a slightly bigger team, which, believe me, is something that we really wanted to put together after last year's experience, because it's quite a bit of work, and just more perspectives and more opinions, and it kind of widens the discussion. It means we can play more stuff and consider more stuff. So that's where we're at just now. And the other kind of difference in Volume 2 is that we're not going to repeat any of the content from the first book. So that means things like we had a Get Into Gaming guide in the first book, which was our kind of run through of what we reckon are great gateway kind of introductory games for new players. Obviously, we can't just run that again, so we're going to have a bit more space for the actual game's criticism and the designer interviews. So there's going to be more pieces that are kind of 4-page spreads rather than 2-page spreads. So we can go into, we get higher word counts for individual games. We can go into a bit more depth. Because a lot of people told us they really enjoyed the longer pieces most.
I think that's just because there's usually, reviews aren't usually, or even previews or written content usually isn't a massive, huge thing. It usually kind of goes around about you're lucky if you get around about 500 words, kind of out there. So some of the longer articles, it is nice to almost see like an extended kind of article on something and learn an awful lot more about the different facets of the game itself, which is always really, really interesting.
Yeah. And I mean, that can be a bit of a challenge because I think, with game reviews, I think there's obviously different people have different tastes, and I'm not saying there's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it, but I don't really go so much for the stuff that goes into kind of explanation of rules and mechanisms. I really prefer something that focuses more on kind of how a game feels to play rather than kind of how it works on a mechanical level. So you really need the right games to give that level of attention to, like Twilight Imperium, for instance. We did a 4-page spread on that in the first book, and I really felt that I could have tacked another 1,000 words onto that because it was it's just such a the word epic gets used a lot in reference to games, and it's often misused, but I think it's totally appropriate there because it's just such a deep kind of complex representation of this kind of grand scale space opera. I think what else got a longer piece Brass Birmingham did.
Yes.
And I mean, I would love to have gone into a bit more detail on things like Castell, which I really enjoyed last year. And then the other thing that we're interested in doing is expanding slightly on the kind of family-friendly games. Because I think that's really something that gets overlooked because so much of the games media is quite geeky and quite kind of enthusiastic, kind of folks like you and me. But as a parent, I really value having games that I can play with my 6-year-old or my 15-year-old when he'll deign to actually speak to me. And I think that there are some fantastic designers working on more family-friendly stuff, and it's kind of flying under the radar. Because the folks who are making YouTube videos or kind of publishing blog posts tend to be kind of dudes in their 30s,
Yeah.
And focusing on the stuff that appeals to them.
Yeah, and there's always, as I continually bang the drum, there's always a focus to kind of focus on the kind of new and exciting. I've tried to. I put a piece out today, which was. I kind of opened it with saying that I tried to get the emotional side of it. It was all about Wildlands, which I kind of had an interesting experience where I had I don't know if you've played Wildlands yourself.
Yeah, I have.
And I had an interesting experience where I played it 2-player for the first time, got through the rules because it's a really small rule book. It's really easy and immediate to get in and play. And I played it with one of my friends and had an absolutely fantastic time. We just rattled through a couple of games, one after the other, because it was so easy to keep going. With that enthusiasm, I then, last week there, tried to sit down with 4 friends and said, look, you've got to try this game, it's amazing. And it kind of fell flat a bit. That's
exactly the experience that I had with my group. And I think the kind of reason for that, as far as I could see, is that because you've got... So in Wildlands, if anyone hasn't played it, everything is done using a hand of cards. So you spend cards to take actions, whether you're kind of moving and attacking on your turn or defending on an opponent's turn. And if that means that if you kind of splurge all your cards and you make a big kind of sweeping attack across the board, you're left without much to defend yourself with.
Yes.
And, if you've got one player who's going to counterattack, you can maybe survive that. If you've got 3 people who are all going to jump on you the moment your kind of defenses are down, I think, I, like you, I had great experiences with Wildlands, but with 4 players, it just didn't hold up for me.
Yeah, as I said, I think I summed up by saying I'd like those people that played it in 4-player to actually go back and experience the joy that I had it with a 2-player. And I'd also like to see myself how I could play it as a 4-player to kind of get... It sounds like it was going to end up being a completely different game, because as you know, you're playing it 2-player, you're kind of back and forward, and it is almost like it becomes quite tactical, and it almost becomes a little bit chess-like, and you deciding, well, I've got to do here, I've got to keep these cards here, so it was kind of but it was more... I mentioned the mechanics, but it was more a case of the kind of the emotional... the emotional turmoil of saying, and there's nothing worse than saying to somebody, this is fantastic, and then at the end him saying, well, it was okay, but I wouldn't go to the shelf and choose it myself. I'd play it if somebody put it onto the table, and to me, I was just like, damn, did we play different games? And it kind of turned out that we kind of had. Have you thought of kind of, as well as kind of doing the board game book, of kind of doing other kind of offshoots of it, or is it just so much bloody work? Because I mean, it takes hours to write. It does take hours to write kind of like 1,000-piece review or preview or whatever. Did you find, was the process of putting this together, was it difficult because you were trying to make it read well to a broader audience instead of maybe just your readers?
I've written for some quite general audiences in the past when I've done stuff for a piece for The Guardian would be for a much more kind of general audience than a piece for Ars Technica or for Tabletop Gaming Magazine. So I mean, there's a couple of principles we stuck to. We actually published I actually kind of wrote a full style guide for the contributors, and one of the things that we said is try not to kind of use too many bits of gamer terminology, because there's going to be a substantial audience coming to this book that has never heard terms like deck building or dudes on a map or area control. Yeah. And things that are quite intuitive to us might not necessarily be quite so clear to somebody who's coming to the hobby for the first time. So it's kind of striking that balance between kind of making it clear to inexperienced or kind of newer players what we're talking about, and not kind of explaining the absolute basics for people who are a bit more, have a few years of gaming under their belt.
Did you find you were more critical then when you were going through the editing process, that you were kind of having to step back and say, oops, I've kind of used some jargon here that nobody's going to get? Did you have that? Did that end up kind of, I take it that must have ended up kind of taking longer than
I mean, that's the thing, and particularly the pieces for the book that I wrote myself were in a way kind of more difficult to edit, because your brain sometimes reads what you meant to write instead of what you've actually written. You know what I mean? But we were quite fortunate. We had everything in the book went past at least 3 pairs of eyes before we went to print, which definitely saved us some blushes. But my dad worked with me. He is a retired journalist himself.
All right. Okay.
So, and the other interesting thing is, he isn't a gamer. He knows a hell of a lot more about games now that he's helped me with this book. But he came in as a complete outsider. So if there was something that didn't make sense, he was actually a really useful guy to have that perspective from. And then I had a couple of friends who looked it over for me as well. One of whom is works in communications and PR, so is quite used to kind of parsing stuff and reading things and seeing whether it's clear or not. And one of whom is a journalist as well. So it's had quite a going over before it got into a state we were happy to release it in. And even still, we've got a small list of kind of typos and things that made it through the net that we're going to correct in the second print run. So, but I think we're at 3 errors that we're aware of. So that's a pretty low ratio, I think.
That is, I mean, that is kind of pretty low. Out of the 3, those errors, whose fault was it? I'm the editor. Ultimately, it all comes down to me. Get with his charge. Send them down, as they would say. So, the plan, you said you're mentioning kind of Volume 2 coming to Kickstarter very, very soon. Are you going to be keeping it round about the same price? I mean, was that one of the things that did you say, well, we got this exactly right?
Well, I really kind of agonised over that. I mean, we released it at £23 RRP, and the kind of basis for that was I looked at books on video games, hardback books with about the same page count, and that was the sort of price that most of them came in at. The kind of big Dark Souls art book, and
I've got that.
All right, okay. So that was our kind of guideline, but obviously they're not quite the same kind of product.
No.
And we didn't know if people would go for it, but we only had one woman complaining at UK Games Expo about it, and that's the only negative thing I've heard about price. And she said, I don't think you'll sell many at that price. And then, 18 hours later, they were all gone. So
just imagine you walking past, seeing that same person, just say, "Here, catch the pallet. It's not going to be that heavy this time because it's empty because we sold everything." Okay, but that would be me. That wouldn't be you. You're obviously a much more gentler soul.
Well. But no, I am the kind of person that I will listen to one piece of criticism before I listen to 100 pieces of praise. And kind of one of the things that I've tried to work on in recent years is to be a bit less negative on myself.
Yes.
And I think certainly just having a project like this, and kind of getting through the difficulties that have been involved with it and getting something out that people seem to value and enjoy and that want, people telling us they want to come back and support the next one. It kind of lifts you up a bit, on a personal level. So,
does it fill you with a quiet confidence that the next one, well, it's potentially a done deal, or are you still a little bit nervous to say, look, we still need to treat this almost like our first Kickstarter? That this is the second edition, but how many people are gonna go out and buy that? Have you consciously been looking at the ways of kind of reaching out to people and marketing in it and things like that again?
Yeah, well, the great thing is we're not starting from zero this time. We have an audience. We can, if we put out an update to our backers from the first campaign, they'll know that the second one's happening. The other thing is that we've had quite a few people get in touch saying, I would have backed this Kickstarter if I'd seen it. I just didn't know it was happening.
Oh, right. Okay.
So that again is encouraging, but we're not taking anything for granted. We're going to keep the kind of size of the book the same. We're going to keep the price the same. The costs for us are going to go up a little bit because we do have a bigger team of contributors.
Yeah.
And we do, we one of the things that I wanted to do right from the start was to kind of pay people a decent rate for their work, because I know that there are people out there, more in the video game space, it seems, than in tabletop games, but who are offering people really kind of low rates for their work, or kind of offering them work for exposure.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And it's just, as someone who's freelanced in various places for years and knows how much of a kind of a struggle that can be at times, I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, that we were treating people right and kind of paying them. Sorry, it does mean that it's not a cheap book to put out, It's also on kind of very nice paper, very nice print process, nice big hardback. But hopefully people appreciate those aspects, and they are willing to come back and back it again, and we'll bring in some new folks. And I'm going to pester you and everyone else who's got a podcast or a blog or a YouTube channel, and just try and, the plan is to try and build the audience over a number of years, and the first one seems to have got off to a good start, and hopefully it just goes places from here.
Did you get people contacting you through the Kickstarter and saying, would you consider taking other submissions? Did you get a couple of people saying, listen, I'm a really good writer that writes really good in that. Here's my 400-page kind of takedown of Sushi Go. Would you consider adding that to your book, pal?
We did. We got a few people getting in touch. I didn't really see anybody's work because at that point, by the time it was on the Kickstarter, the process was locked in. So even if someone had kind of been the George Orwell or the Raymond Chandler of board game writing, we wouldn't have been able to add them in at that point. Obviously, the team's got a little bit bigger for the next one. We also have people who've asked us if they could be involved in future editions, and it all just really depends on how well this one does. But yeah, one of the great things is there are just some great tabletop writers out there at the moment. And I think that writing is something that people don't really appreciate the importance of, because so much of the gaming media is in, audio or video formats. But that all, you need to have the basic skills of being able to structure a piece and convey information clearly and know your audience. And, even if you're not producing a piece of text to be consumed by a reader, it's still a process of writing and editing. And there are some people out there who are doing great work in it. The guys that Shut Up and Sit Down are fantastic at it.
Yeah.
No pun included. Folks like Dan Thuro.
Yes.
The guy who runs Space Biff.
Yes.
I think he's fantastic. Folks like Charlie Thiel, Sam Desatoff. It does have to be said, it seems to be mostly guys who are getting the attention. And if there are, some great kind of women and non-binary authors or bloggers out there that I don't know about, I would love to hear about them.
Yeah, it's kind of weird because I kind of want to, see when I'm doing the podcast, I want to say will anybody kind of get in contact with me? And I also want to say, especially if you're a person of colour, female, whatever. But then I feel like, am I just throwing out that there? And I feel a bit awkward about it. But I think sometimes you need to kind of say that in order to get, certain people kind of getting in contact with you. You know what I mean? Because for other people, it's just a case of, I'm just going to get in contact with you because I'm used to just reaching out to people and saying hello. Where there are some people who are like, well, I'm not sure. And I think sometimes if you don't put the invite out there, then you can't be surprised if you kind of don't get the response. But yeah, I mean, we're always happy to have, anybody on the show. At all from any walk of life, and we've always kind of said that, and that's always been our one of the things that we've always done since the beginning of the show. And I totally understand where you're kind of coming from, with looking for kind of writers from kind of different backgrounds as well. Is there anybody that's on the scalping list that you would like to have in the book? If there could be anybody that you would like to be in the 3rd edition or the 4th edition, that you'd like to have kind of writing something?
Yeah, I mean, some of the names I've already mentioned would be great to have involved. Obviously, we do need to keep the team within the limits of the budget. But I mean, as I say, there are some really fantastic people writing about games at the moment, and it's just, ultimately that's good for the hobby and the industry, and for the, I think that criticism is a vital part of any artistic medium if you want to sound all highfalutin about it. If we are in a position in the next couple of years to bring in more people and kind of support that critical process, then it would be fantastic to do that.
Yeah, I think we're still at the beginning of that. I think we're still finding our feet with regards to there being kind of proper criticism of the hobby. And I don't mean that, I mean critiquing. I don't mean somebody running in and going, this is all rubbish, and then running out again.
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of that, obviously.
There's plenty of that going about at the moment. And I think you're right, I think there needs to be a little bit more introspection and breaking things down a little bit more, and not just talking about, hey, here's a game, this is how you play it, this is what I think. But as you said, kind of getting the emotional intelligence kind of behind it, and kind of finding out why I want to play it and what I felt when I played it, and that kind of thing, and thinking beyond just the normal demographic of kind of board gaming. What was interesting was, speaking of outside the normal demographic of board gaming, that Wingspan was announced that it won one of the big awards at the Spiel des Jahres, which
nice segue.
I just ruined it. And were you surprised at that? Were you kind of
not massively, because I'd heard really good things about it. The presentation looked lovely. I haven't played it. This is one of the downsides of having a kind of team that you're collaborating with, is that you do have to farm out some of the work to other people.
Yeah.
So I have not had the opportunity to play Wingspan. But I mean, certainly, I think that it obviously received a lot of attention. The components looked lovely. The theme was something fresh and something that's going to kind of grab people's attention that the 900th game about orcs pillaging a castle full of zombies probably wouldn't. So yeah, I mean, I was glad to see something different being recognised and something different doing well.
Yeah, I must admit, it was kind of the same. I kind of thought it was definitely going to be there. It was definitely going to get mentioned, and I think Elizabeth themselves have been very strong on the advocacy of, if I've done this and if I've come from nowhere, then anybody can come along with a really good idea and kind of make something out of it, which was good. And it was an interesting game because I don't think it was one of these things, hey, look, here's a game that's come out of nowhere and everybody loves kind of thing. I think it actually, the people that I know who have played it, including Steve, who writes for the show, he's sat down a couple of times with it and he says he's enjoyed it kind of every single time. And one of the things he likes is, as you said, it's the theme. It's kind of I think it took an awful lot of folk by surprise. And we had Elizabeth on the show and she was very determined and very focused about where she kind of wanted to be, and I think that kind of helps. I don't think it was an award for the sake of giving an award. I think it was very, very much kind of well earned. I think, surprisingly enough, I've heard more people say more controversial things about Just One. That was one that
really?
kind of won.
Okay. Yeah. I've had a really good time with Just One.
I haven't played it, but I've seen a couple of folk kind of say, "Oh, here we go, it's the mind all over again," and I'm just like,
"No, it isn't.
Is it not just people having fun and having kind of game fun and gathering people around and having a damn good time? Isn't that the whole point of it?" And
I mean, the Spiel des Jahres, the whole premise is that it's meant to be awarded to games that anyone can sit down and play.
Exactly.
And I think that the Kenner Spiel obviously is something a little bit different, but I think that expecting a level of complexity out of the Spiel winner that appeals to kind of grizzled, beardy kind of geeks in game stores is probably unreasonable. Yeah.
I mean, if you look at things like previous winners, I mean, like your King Domino and things like that, this world, I mean, they're absolutely fantastic games, but as you say, they're kind of there for people to have fun. I've played King Domino with a lot more non-gamers than I have with what I would consider people who have a kind of a foot in the hobby. Mm-hmm. Which is kind of interesting. So
and there is almost a kind of hipster snobbishness. It's like it's the equivalent of oh, you like that band? Well, I like this band. You probably wouldn't have heard of them. I think there is an element of that sometimes.
I think there's always a difficult shift over when things start to become kind of more and more mainstream. I think you get it's like the interesting things somebody said to me the other day about TV shows. How you're starting to see more and more games being mentioned within TV shows. I mean, they were talking about, what was it? What was one? Killing Eve. The last episode of Killing Eve that I saw, they were all sitting around playing Dixit.
Right.
For goodness sake. And, a couple of years ago, folk would have been saying, oh, that's amazing, they've got kind of like a board game in a mainstream TV show. And now I see a couple of people going, oh, for goodness sake, Dixit. This is ridiculous kind of thing, and it's like, but you're kind of getting where you want the thing to be, which is that everybody, exactly where you want kind of people to be. But it's the same in any hobby, regardless. I'm sure it's the same with like guys who are into fishing shows and stuff like that. They would have been, screaming at Boris Johnson about his kipper when he was showing it on kind of TV. Are you going to get any downtime then? I mean, are you still able to get stuff to the table yourself? Have you managed to kind of get...
well, that's I mean, it is a challenge at times. Mm-hmm. Obviously I have kind of family commitments and I do freelance work in various places. I've left The Guardian now, which frees up a bit of time but puts a hell of a lot more pressure on my my bank account. But yeah, I mean, one of the things about writing about games and doing the book in particular is that sometimes you play the games that you have to play rather than the games that you want to play.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Particularly if stuff's commissioned by other outlets. And kind of one of the challenges is to approach games with a level of kind of curiosity and enthusiasm and open-mindedness that they deserve, even if it is the fourth thing that you've played that night, and you just want to go to bed. But it's not digging ditches. It's not a great hardship, and if that's the most difficult aspect of the job, then I'm not going to complain about it.
Do you try and change your style? I mean, I know we mentioned this earlier on, but are you conscious of? Do you constantly review how you write to try and change your style or improve on the style or improve on how you're kind of talking to people about the game?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think just stylistically, I used to have this thing for threes. I would structure sentences, and this is getting a bit geeky and technical.
No?
But I would say, it's it's this, and it's this. And I just felt I was using that a bit too much, and it also reminded me of Tony Blair, because I noticed that he kind of employed that a lot in a lot of his speeches.
Yeah.
And it made me feel deeply uncomfortable on a fundamental level. So, so that's more or less gone now. And I mean, it's really, I know I mentioned George Orwell earlier. There are two kind of main influences on my writing. One is George Orwell. And if anyone has not read Politics in the English Language, I think that is, it's a short read, and it's well worth a look. And it really emphasizes kind of clarity and straightforwardness, which I think are the two most important things that any writer should work towards. Mm-hmm. And then the other is Harold Evans, who was the editor of the Times and wrote a book called Newsman's English, which has been retitled English for Journalists, I think, in recognition of the fact that women actually work in journalism. And that's another really great resource. The copy I've got is actually my dad's, and it's quite old and battered and contains lots of references to reporting on the Soviet Union and things like that, which might not be, the subject matter might not be relevant so much these days, but the actual kind of technique and the thought process behind a lot of it is still really valuable, and something that I've kind of taken a lot of inspiration from.
Is there enough money within the media side for you to continue kind of doing this on a kind of a freelance basis, or are you having to kind of look further afield to kind of just be a writer within another kind of field to keep going?
Yeah, so in media overall, you can put a living together, but it gets tougher. People have smaller budgets to commission from, and if you're freelance, then anytime you kind of pitch something to an outlet, then you have to have some sort of compelling reason why you should write it and not someone that they've already got on staff. Having a specialism and having kind of contacts that other people don't have can be really valuable. But in games specifically, I have been kind of trying to build up a couple of different kind of places that I can work for. So Ars Technica are, they're great. They're part of Condé Nast, and they're fantastic to work for. Obviously, there's the book now. There's Tabletop Gaming Magazine, and that just, what the team have done there, and kind of making this, going from this kind of quarterly kind of niche publication to something that comes out every month and gives people like me a regular source of places to write is fantastic. So yeah, it's about piecing kind of 3-4 things together and trying to make it work. At the moment, I'm looking at doing some kind of feature pieces elsewhere. I'm looking at doing potentially some travel writing as well.
All right. Okay.
So the bulk of what I'm doing is games writing. I'm also looking at a couple of other kind of possible publishing opportunities, because having brought the board game book out, through a lot of trial and error, I've got the kind of basic process of kind of producing and distributing a book. And there are a couple of other subjects I'd quite like to look at. I'd like to do, I can't really say too much about it just now, but I've been speaking to some folks about potentially a kind of kids science related thing.
Yeah.
Because I'd love to just do stuff that, even if it's not related to gaming, is still quite nerdy. And the kind of opportunity to maybe work with some other writers and to publish their stuff is really attractive as well. So it's all stuff that I'm looking into, and if all else fails, I don't know, cross that bridge when I come to it. Find some other way to pay the mortgage.
Exactly. I mean, it's just, as I say, you kind of do what you can at the time and kind of keep it going. But I mean, the book is doing really, really well. You've got, that could be obviously a continual kind of thing, which is kind of cool. I was going to ask if people want to kind of keep an eye on what you are going to be up to. How do they find you on the internet? How, if they want to get a copy of this fabulous book, which is currently keeping me nice and fanned, where can they get a copy?
Well, the cool thing about being distributed through Asmodee and Gardeners is that they can get it in literally any game store or bookstore, even if they don't have it in stock. If you go in and ask for it, they'll be able to look it up, and there's a big, complex international system that will tell the handy kind of shopkeeper where they can get it. So definitely support your local bookstore and your local game store. Failing that, you can get it online. You can get it through the big bad Amazon. You can, it's sort of a necessary evil, really. But you can also, if you look at our website, which is boardgame-book.com, we've got a list of different sites that stock it in the US and the UK. We've actually just sorted out distribution for Australia as well, so it will be available in shops there very soon, and New Zealand. The one thing we're looking for is a US kind of game trade distributor, and it's kind of a harder sell to the US distributors because they didn't grow up with the Beano Annual.
Yes.
So you say, like, it's a hardback book that comes out every year, and it doesn't set off this kind of flood of nostalgic memories for them.
Stick a G.I. Joe sticker on the front of it and they'll be all over it like tramp on chips.
Yeah, could do. We'd probably get sued by Mattel, but
you could call it something else. You could call it HJ.
G.I. Jim.
Jim, there you go.
Yeah.
Problem solved.
The Scottish militaristic superhero. Sounds
really, really good. Stitch that.
I think this is becoming a pitch meeting, isn't it? Yeah.
It could be. There's a whole. I have a whole plethora of kind of ideas.
That's his franchise to me. That's like, yeah.
I'm
Marvel
smelling,
Cinematic Universe.
I'm smelling the
stuff.
plastic of the toys and the hum of the PlayStation 4s as the video games are there on its free to play, with its various kind of costumes that you can buy and bankrupt your parents. What about your good self? Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can get me on Twitter. I am Owen_Duffy. You can also follow the book on Twitter, which is Board Game Book, all one word. Mm-hmm. I signed up for that Instagram thing.
Oh yeah.
Although it's owned by Facebook, and I hate Facebook. I hate it. Words cannot express how creepy and intrusive and socially disruptive and nasty and pernicious and just generally crap I find Facebook. And Mark Zuckerberg just seems like a guy who has dark secrets. I don't know what they are, but he definitely has them.
I think was he not in the new Picard trailer at the end?
Oh, now that you mention it,
I think that was him. Either that or was Data.
I don't want to say anything derogatory about a guy who has such expensive lawyers, but just tell me, like, see if somebody found bodies in his back garden, would you be entirely surprised?
I'd be surprised if he hadn't eaten some of them.
Yeah, he's got this rule that he only eats things that he's killed himself, which, If I was a Facebook employee that was behind on my targets, I'd be a bit worried.
Exactly. I'm getting Hannibal Lecter, They sent a programmer to test me the other day. I ate his liver with some further beans and a nice Chianti. And on you go.
But so the long and short of it is, yes, we are on Instagram. We're on Instagram, owned by potential cannibal Mark Zuckerberg. But
he'll be delighted. He listens to the show, so he'll
big
be
fan,
delighted.
big fan.
He's a big fan of the show.
Board game book on that as well, so come and find us.
Awesome. I'll put all those links into the show notes so that we have got notes to show. Thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, no worries. It's always good to chat.
I can't believe it's been a year. I'm always getting embarrassed now because it's like, it's not been that long ago. And then I look back at like kind of Skype history, and then it's like, oh, it has been that long ago. This is terrible. But
at least it's not me and my auntie.
I know, you'd just be getting like 52 minutes of a complete guilt trip. But awesome. I can only wish you the best of luck with the Kickstarter when it comes out. Obviously, we will make sure that we plaster that link when it is live all across the internet webs as well.
Awesome.
And
the other thing I should really mention is that we will probably be doing a very small Kickstarter campaign for the second printing.
All right, cool.
Because we're just about sold out the print run, so keep an eye out for that. That'll be in the next couple of weeks, and it'll only be a small target, really simple. Pays your money, gets your book, and
cool.
Hopefully people will help us to keep it available and crucially give us stock for Christmas, because that would be nice.
Well, we'll make sure that when you send that over to me, I will make sure that is spread far and wide as well, sir, because it is the least I can do. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, go to the internet web, search for We're Not Wizards, and you'll find us on various places, worn out places like, we are on Instagram because we're internet tarts, and we're on Facebook, and we're on our website, and we've got our blog, which we write stuff on, which is we're-not-wizards.blogspot.com, and we're on YouTube, and you can find us all on the podcast catchers of your choice, especially the ones that use the word pod and the word cast in them, and all these other ones that apparently don't use the word pod or cast in them either. If you like what you've listened to, there's a couple of things you can do. Tell someone else. It's always nice to be recommended. Or tell somebody you don't like, because it's always nice to maybe torture somebody that annoys you with my voice, but maybe not Owen's. The other thing you can do is jump onto Apple Podcasts and give us a rating or a review. And if you are going to be giving us a rating or a review or a subscription, remember not to give us 10 stars because it makes us big-headed, but don't give us 1 star because it makes me cry and I'm hot and bothered enough as it is. Give us something in the middle like a 5 because it's average. We're just a little bit average, but the person who's not been average tonight is a rather wonderful, rather fantastic Mr. Owen Duffy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me.
You're very, very welcome. There's only 2 more things to do. First thing is to remember that we're many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards?
That depends. Do you count mages?
No.
Right, then we're not wizards.
Fantastic. And the second thing is to say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Owen. Say goodbye, Owen.
Goodbye, Owen.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe. Roll 6s. Make something awful. And, if you're kind of liking your cardboard and you fancy actually liking a bit of some paper instead, get yourself a copy of this fantastic thing that I'm holding in my hands right now because it's wonderful. Listen to it flick. Smell the glue. But until the next time, goodbye.
A wizard is never licked. nor is he early. He arrives precisely when he means to.